My brother left his 6-year-old son with me for one summer. 11 years later, he came back in a black SUV with a lawyer. Pack Owen's things, Mark said. He's coming with me. I stared at the man who had missed 11 birthdays and every Christmas since Owen was 6. Then the lawyer opened her folder and placed a death certificate on my kitchen table. The name was Rebecca Cole, Owen's mother. I looked at my brother. You told us she died 12 years ago. Mark's face changed, and I knew his disappearance wasn't the biggest lie he had told me. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 47, and for most of Owen's childhood, I was simply Aunt Sarah. I never asked him to call me Mom. I had the school meetings, baseball practices, late-night fevers, and bad dreams. That was enough. It started one June when Mark arrived at my apartment with Owen, one small suitcase, and a blue dinosaur backpack. Just for the summer, he said. He had found work in Arizona and needed 8 weeks to save money. Owen's mother, Rebecca, had been gone for years. Mark told me she had died after struggling with drugs. Whenever I asked for details, he shut down. Before leaving, Mark knelt in front of Owen. I'll be back before school starts. Owen believed him. So did I. August came. Mark said the job was delayed. September came. He needed another month. By October, his phone was disconnected. At first, Owen asked about him every day, then every week. On his 7th birthday, he left one slice of cake untouched. That's for Dad if he comes late. He didn't come. I filed for guardianship so I could enroll Owen in school and take him to doctors. Mark never appeared in court. Eventually, the guardianship became long-term. Every attempt to find him ended the same way. Gone. So life moved forward because children don't stop growing, while adults decide whether to return. Owen became funny, stubborn, and obsessed with baseball. At 13, he broke his wrist sliding into second base. At 14, he built me a crooked bookshelf in shop class. At 15, he asked the question I feared most. Do you think Dad left because of me? No. 6-year-olds don't make adults disappear. Adults make their own choices. He nodded. That was the last time he asked about Mark. Until the black SUV appeared in my driveway. Mark looked older, but not broken. Nice jacket, expensive watch. The woman beside him was Evelyn Bennett. Minutes later, we sat at the kitchen table where Owen had done homework since 1st grade. Mark didn't apologize or ask what Owen liked. He said, I'm his father. Whatever happened before, he belongs with me now. Belongs? You know what I mean. Then Ms. Bennett opened her folder. Rebecca's death certificate said she had died 3 weeks earlier. Cancer, not 12 years ago. 3 weeks. I went cold. You told a 6-year-old boy his mother was dead. Mark rubbed his jaw. She wasn't in his life. That isn't the same thing. Before he answered, the front door opened. Owen came home from baseball practice. He walked into the kitchen, stopped, and stared at Mark. I had kept one photograph. Owen knew exactly who he was. Mark stood. Hey, buddy. Owen's expression didn't change. Don't call me that. Then he noticed the death certificate. What's that? No one answered fast enough. He picked it up. I watched his eyes move across the page. Rebecca Cole. Date of death, 3 weeks ago. He looked at me. You told me she died when I was little. I told you what your father told me. Owen turned to Mark. My mother was alive? Mark said nothing. That silence answered everything. Owen walked upstairs and locked his bedroom door. When I returned to the kitchen, I told Mark to leave. That was when Ms. Bennett said, Mr. Mitchell, I think you should tell your sister why you really came. Mark's eyes snapped toward her. She doesn't need to know everything. She does if you intend to ask for custody. I looked at the lawyer. Custody? Ms. Bennett closed the folder. I should clarify. I'm not Mark's attorney. Mark paled. I represent Rebecca Cole's estate. Rebecca had spent years searching for Owen. After she and Mark separated, Mark told her he had moved away with Owen. Later, he claimed Owen had been adopted by relatives in another state. Rebecca hired investigators twice. Both searches failed. Then, 7 months earlier, she found Mark. Not Owen. Mark. She was already sick and begged him to say where Owen was. At first, he refused. Then he learned Rebecca had inherited her parents' house and land. Suddenly, he became cooperative. "How much?" I asked. Mark slammed his hand on the table. "This isn't about money." Ms. Bennett looked at him. "Then you won't mind me answering." She turned to me. After the property was sold and medical expenses were paid, Owen became the beneficiary of a trust worth about $480,000. Mark looked away. His expensive watch suddenly meant something else. The trust was protected. Mark couldn't take it. Rebecca also left Owen a letter, 11 birthday cards, and a request that he be allowed to meet her family. Mark believed that if Owen lived with him before turning 18, he could repair the relationship and perhaps persuade his son to help him financially later. He called it starting over. I called it arriving 11 years late with a plan. Then Ms. Bennett placed a faded envelope on the table. It was addressed to me. My old apartment. The postmark was 9 years old. "I found this among Rebecca's records," she said. The letter had been returned unopened. Inside was one sentence that broke me. "Please tell Owen I am alive, and I have never stopped looking for him." For years, I thought Owen's mother had abandoned him. All that time, she had been searching. Owen came downstairs 20 minutes later. His eyes were red. "I want to read her letter." Ms. Bennett handed him the sealed envelope Rebecca had left for him. He opened it at the table. Halfway through, he stopped and pressed his fist against his mouth, then kept reading. When he finished, Mark stepped closer. "Owen, I know I messed up, but I'm still your dad. Come with me for a while. We can fix this." Owen looked at him. "Where were you?" Mark swallowed. "I had problems. For 11 years? I went to prison for a while. Then I was trying to get clean. I was ashamed." That was another truth I had never known. For 4 years, Mark had been in prison for fraud. Afterward, he drifted from state to state, working, relapsing, starting over. For 1 second, I saw my old brother beneath the lies. Then Owen asked, "When did you find Aunt Sarah again?" Mark said nothing. Ms. Bennett answered, 7 months ago." Owen stared at his father. "You knew where I was for 7 months?" "Yes." "And you came 3 weeks after Mom died?" Mark whispered, "Yes." Owen nodded slowly. That was the moment he understood. His father hadn't come back because he finally found him. He came because there was something to gain. "I'm not going with you," Owen said. "I'm your father." "No, you're my father biologically." Then he looked at me. "She raised me." Mark started crying quietly, like a man finally realizing regret doesn't rewind time. He left without Owen. There was no courtroom battle. Maybe Mark knew Owen would turn 18 in 3 months, and no judge could return the childhood he had abandoned. A week later, Ms. Bennett brought Rebecca's box. There were 11 birthday cards. On his 10th, "I wonder if you still hate peas." On his 14th, "I hope someone is teaching you to drive carefully." On his 17th, 2 months before she died, "If I never find you, please don't confuse my absence with a lack of love." Owen cried harder over that sentence than I had ever seen him cry. That fall, we drove to Rebecca's hometown. He met her sister, saw childhood pictures he had never seen, then stood at his mother's grave for almost an hour. When he returned to the car, he said, "I spent my whole life thinking 2 people left me. I didn't know what to say." He looked at me. Turns out one of them was trying to come back. Mark wrote 6 months later. No lawyer, no request for money, just a letter. He said he had returned to treatment and understood if Owen never wanted to see him again. Owen read it once and placed it with Rebecca's cards. Are you going to answer? I asked. Not yet. Then he looked at me. But maybe someday. Owen is 18 now. The trust is protected, and he's starting college in the fall. That crooked bookshelf is still leaning in my living room because he refuses to let me replace it. And Mark? I don't know if he'll ever earn a place in Owen's life again. That choice belongs to Owen. But I learned something from the summer that lasted 11 years. Family isn't the person who appears when there's money, guilt, or something to reclaim. Family is the person who stays after the suitcase is unpacked. The person beside the hospital bed at 2 in the morning, who knows what scares you and how quiet you become when your heart is breaking. My brother asked me to raise his son for one summer. He came back 11 years later to take him away. But by then, Owen already knew the difference between the person who gave him his name and the person who gave him a home.